KSOO being sentenced for Bibby's murder and the phrase "goodbye forever" has the internet talking, months after he and his cousin were sentenced to life in prison for the 2020 murder of 23-year-old Charles "Lil Buck" McCormick Jr. Hakeem KSOO. Robinson pleaded guilty in the death of another fellow Jacksonville rapper, admitting to fatally shooting 16-year-old Adrian "Lil Bby" Gaynor Jr. at the Hilltop Village Apartments on February 25, 2019. Robinson was sentenced to 10 years in prison after pleading guilty to second-degree murder in Gaynor's death. So KSOO has now been convicted for 2 separate murders, and the way his entire family, including his own father, got tangled into this is one of the most layered stories in Jacksonville rap history. The title says KSOO was sentenced for Bibby's murder. Before we understand the sentencing, we have to understand the murder itself and who Bibby was. Adrian Gaynor, known as Bibby, was a 16-year-old friend of rapper Julio Fulio, who was shot and killed in the Hilltop Village Apartments in 2019. Now, Bibby was not just any teenager from Jacksonville. Gaynor was shot to death in the parking lot of the Hilltop Village Apartments in northwest Jacksonville. Gaynor is the younger brother of Fulio, so Bibby was directly connected to one of the most prominent figures on the KTA side of Jacksonville's gang war. His older brother was Julio Fulio, whose real name was Charles Jones, and Fulio was, at the time, the face of a faction known as KTA. Now, to understand how this murder even happened, you need to understand the landscape of Jacksonville in late 2018 and early 2019. Gaynor's death is one of the most high-profile cases tied to the escalating tensions between Jacksonville rap-affiliated gangs ATK and KTA. ATK is associated with Jacksonville rapper Youngin Ace, whereas KTA is aligned with late rapper Julio Fulio, who was slain in a shooting in June 2024. Two sides, ATK and KTA, had been going back and forth in both music and violence for years, and by early 2019, things had reached a boiling point. The string of violence surrounding the ATK dates back to 2019, when rapper Willie Addison, another one of Robinson Sr.'s sons known as Boss Goon, was killed and 5 others were wounded in Spring Park. Willie Addison, also known as Boss Goon, was KSOO's stepbrother. He was shot and killed coming out of a club. Shot in the back was ATK rapper KSOO and his father, who was shot in the back. KSOO and his father were both present at the scene and were both hit during the attack. KSOO survived. His stepbrother did not. The following February, Julio Fulio's little 16-year-old brother, Adrian Dennard Gaynor Jr., aka Bibby, was killed. This happened in February 2019. Gaynor was shot to death on February 25, 2019 at New Hope Apartments, formerly known as the Hilltop Village Apartments. According to the arrest warrant on that day, Robinson chased Gaynor through the apartment complex before shooting him at close range in the back of the head-neck area. When Gaynor saw the 2 men coming, he started running but was gunned down in front of witnesses. The other person escaped. The crime scene was violent. Investigators reportedly recovered 45 shell casings from the scene. According to Robinson's arrest warrant, 45 shell casings. That is the number of rounds fired at or around a 16-year-old kid in an apartment complex parking lot. Officers found Gaynor's body in the parking lot of the apartment complex after a 911 call that February afternoon. He died at the scene. Now here's what made this case particularly infamous. Following the murder, the warrant states that Robinson posted several pictures and videos on social media, bragging about it. This was not a situation where the suspect stayed quiet or tried to lay low. According to the arrest warrant and multiple reports, KSOO went on social media and posted content that referenced and mocked Bibby's death. Adrian Gaynor's nickname was Bibby, and his mother said Robinson named an album after her son. Called Bibby Out, KSOO reportedly put the faces of deceased rivals, including Bibby, on the cover of that project. The pain for Bibby's family was compounded by these posts. Bibby's mother, Elizabeth Gaynor, spoke publicly about the aftermath. She stated, "I feel like my life stopped. When my baby died, my life stopped. I don't feel alive anymore." She described how she and her family had to see content online mocking her son's death. She said, "We had to see my son's body online. I heard my son's last words from them. They uploaded his last words. They laughed. They mocked the way he was running away from the gunshots. They laughed at the way he fell at the murder scene and crawled across the grass." The song Who I Smoke by Jacksonville rapper Spinnabenz featuring Youngin Ace went on to become one of the most viral drill records in the country. In that song, Ace directly references the murder of Robinson's other alleged victim, Adrian Gaynor, whose nickname was Bibby, as he lists off names of people he has allegedly smoked. The song seems to serve as a confession that ATK carried out the killing. It racked up tens of millions of views, turning real-life violence into entertainment consumed by millions of people worldwide. Despite the bragging and the social media posts, it took 2 years for an arrest to be made in Bibby's case. According to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, Robinson was arrested on March 11, 2021, and charged with Gaynor's murder. At the time of his arrest, he was already in custody on separate charges related to the January 2020 killing of Charles Lil Buck McCormick Jr. So by the time they got around to formally charging KSOO for Bibby's death, he was already sitting in the Duval County Jail on murder charges from an entirely separate case. But we'll get to that. The Bibby case was not the only murder charge KSOO was facing. In fact, the case that went to trial first was a different killing altogether: the murder of Charles McCormick Jr., known as Lil Buck. Robinson received life in prison for the January 2020 murder of Charles Lil Buck McCormick on Oct. 1, 2025. McCormick was shot to death in Dames Point Plaza on Merrill Road on January 15, 2020. The motive for McCormick's murder, according to prosecutors, was rooted in the same gang war that took Bibby's life. According to prosecutors, the motive for McCormick's murder involved a diss track McCormick had created about Abdul Robinson Sr.'s stepson, Willie Addison, who was killed in a drive-by shooting in 2019. So let's trace the chain of events here. Willie Addison, KSOO's stepbrother and Abdul Robinson Sr.'s stepson, is killed in a shooting in January 2019. In the months that follow, Lil Buck, who was affiliated with the rival faction, records a song that references Addison's death. Charles McCormick, aka Lil Buck, mocked the death of Robinson's brother Willie Addison in a song called Young Show Off. According to prosecutors, KSOO took this as reason to retaliate. Prosecutors alleged that Robinson, Whitaker, and an accomplice, Dominique Butta Barner, tracked the victim to a shopping center in Arlington, where KSOO allegedly carried out the shooting. On January 15, 2020, exactly 1 year after Addison's death, Lil Buck was shot and killed outside that shopping plaza on Merrill Road. Barner was offered a plea deal after admitting to driving the car on the day McCormick was killed. Barner stated that Hakeem Robinson wanted to kill McCormick for making a diss song against Hakeem's deceased half-brother Willie Addison, who was killed in a drive-by shooting. Dominique Barner, known as Buddha, was the getaway driver. He cooperated with investigators and testified against KSOO and his co-defendant, Leroy Whitaker, also known as ATK Scotty. The trial took place in July 2025. It lasted 7 days of testimony. Jacksonville rapper Hakeem Robinson was found guilty Thursday of first-degree murder in the 2020 shooting death of 23-year-old Charles McCormick Jr. The verdict, reached after just over 3 hours of deliberation, followed Thursday morning's guilty verdict for co-defendant Leroy Whitaker Jr., who is Robinson's cousin. The case was particularly notable because of the evidence used by prosecutors. Christopher Smith, the lead investigator in the McCormick murder case, acknowledged on the stand that the rap song KSOO Homicide and an Instagram post with McCormick's photo and the words "Bye Bye" were both considered key pieces of evidence in his investigation. Prosecutors pointed to KSOO's music and social media as direct evidence linking him to the murder. The defense pushed back hard on this. The defense countered, saying the case wasn't about gang retaliation. It was about prosecutors misinterpreting music and turning performers into criminals. Robinson's attorney Christopher DeCoste said, posting "Bye Bye Bye" that could just be a reflection of him disliking the guy. They also pointed to physical descriptions. Witnesses, including one of the KSOO officers who chased the alleged shooter, described McCormick's killer as 5 feet, 8 inches to 5 feet, 9 inches tall and slender. Defense attorneys pointed out throughout the trial that Hakeem Robinson stands well over 6 feet, but the jury was not persuaded. Robinson was charged with first-degree murder, which is a mandatory life sentence in the state of Florida. The jury deliberated for 3.5 hours. 3.5 hours. That's it. In a case involving weeks of testimony and mountains of evidence, the jury came back in less than 4 hours with a guilty verdict. KSOO and his co-defendant Leroy Whitaker were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in Duval County Court for the January 2020 murder of Charles Lil Buck McCormick. So before KSOO even got to the Bibby case, he was already done. Life without parole. That was October 1st, 2025. The Bibby sentencing would come months later. If there is one element of this entire saga that has generated more debate than anything else, it is the role of KSOO's father, Abdul Robinson Sr., because this was not a case where a stranger or an associate flipped. This was a father testifying against his own child on the witness stand. The murder trial of Jacksonville rapper KSOO officially began its first phase with jury selection on Monday, July 21st, in a case that continues to attract national attention for its deeply personal and unexpected twist. His own father is set to testify against him. Abdul Robinson Sr., also known as Blue, was not just a bystander in this situation. Robinson Sr. has been identified by the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office as the alleged leader of a violent gang known as ATK. He was a co-defendant in the Lil Buck murder case. Robinson Sr. himself has pleaded guilty to accessory in this case. He said on the stand that he helped KSOO's co-defendants burn the clothes that they wore during the crime. He has also pleaded guilty to soliciting a murder where the hitman missed his target and killed a bicyclist, David Rothermel, on Emerson Road in Jacksonville. So Abdul Robinson Sr. was facing charges in multiple cases. The weight of those potential sentences was immense. A defense attorney asked Robinson Sr. to clarify what he is receiving in exchange for his testimony as part of a plea deal. He said he will now face a maximum of 20 years in prison instead of a potential maximum of 60 years. 60 years reduced to 20. That's the deal he took during a deposition in 2023 after Abdul Robinson Sr. agreed to testify against his son. He identified his son as a killer. In court on the fourth day of the trial, Abdul Robinson Sr. was shown the footage of the murder, and he stated that the man shooting Charles was his son. He pointed at his own child and identified him as the shooter on surveillance video. He identified Robinson as the shooter in the video, though he said it was the hardest thing he had done in his life. He also said that he did not know their plans. However, Abdul admitted that he helped his son and Leroy Whitaker burn their clothes, seemingly to get rid of the evidence. He didn't know about the plan to kill Lil Buck ahead of time, he says, but he helped destroy evidence afterward. When the defense had their chance to cross-examine him, they went after his credibility. Robinson's attorney said Robinson's father was no more than a DNA donor, and that his own violent history meant he was not a trustworthy witness. The attorney for Hakeem Robinson painted Robinson Sr. as someone who was taking a deal to save himself. When Hakeem's attorney asked if his objective was to protect himself, Abdul answered yes. The defense's argument was straightforward. This man is lying to save his own skin. He's looking at potentially dying in prison, and so he will say whatever the state asks him to say. But Abdul Robinson Sr. also offered his own explanation for why he did it. Robinson Sr. told the court he is cooperating, so he can be released in time to spend time with his younger children, telling stories about his 8-year-old daughter wanting him to attend a dance and his 6-year-old wanting to play football together. He also talked about health concerns that he feels may shorten his life, such as diabetes, failing kidneys, and congestive heart failure. He later defended his decision on social media before the trial even happened. In a post that went viral, Abdul Robinson Sr. wrote his justification publicly. "If it was me and my daddy in a situation like this, I would have been freed my daddy a long time ago, no matter what my consequences would have been." He added, "Especially if he's a good, great daddy. He could do more for me out of jail than in jail prison. Who leave there? Daddy in jail to rot, especially when you know he innocent." In other words, Abdul Robinson Sr. was saying that KSOO should have confessed to free him, and because KSOO didn't do that, Abdul Sr. felt justified in cooperating with prosecutors. Netizens had a mixed reaction to it, as some defended Abdul Robinson Sr., saying he taught his son accountability, while others stated that he betrayed KSOO. The internet was split right down the middle. Some people argued that a father should never testify against his own child under any circumstance. Others argued that if your child commits murder, the responsibility lies with the person who pulled the trigger. And in the end, what did Abdul Robinson Sr. get for his cooperation? Due to his cooperation, the 54-year-old is getting off on time served, 1,898 days, to be exact. That's roughly 5 years and 2 months. He walked. He must serve 2 years of community control with electronic monitoring. After that, he needs to complete 3 years of probation with special conditions. Compare that with the 60 years he was potentially facing. Compare that with the life sentence his son received. The judge made her feelings on the matter known at sentencing. The judge stated, "I will tell you that for your cooperation in this matter, if you were before me on this variety of cases, I would be sentencing you to life in prison today. Because what I heard in the testimony of not only what happened to Ms. Buckley and Mr. McCormick, but in the other cases, that kind of activity between you and the rest of your then friends, now obviously not so much, has been a scourge on him." The judge acknowledged that without the plea deal, she would have sentenced him to life as well. So Abdul Robinson Sr. helped send his own son to life in prison, and in exchange he got to go home. Now we arrive at the sentencing referenced in the title of this video. On February 23, 2026, on Monday, KSOO, born Hakeem Armani Robinson, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder of 16-year-old rapper Adrian Lil Bibby Gaynor in 2019. The Jacksonville rapper was sentenced to 10 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. Let that sink in. This marks KSOO's second murder conviction following his guilty verdict in July of 2025. For the murder of rapper Charles Lil Buck McCormick in 2020, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole in that case. He is already serving life without parole. This 10-year sentence runs on top of that. In practical terms, the 10 years is symbolic. The life sentence ensures he never gets out, regardless of whether this additional sentence existed or not. Now, the question many people are asking is, why only 10 years for killing a 16-year-old? The answer lies in the plea deal. KSOO pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, not first-degree murder. First-degree murder in Florida carries a mandatory life sentence. Second-degree murder allows for a range of sentences. By accepting the plea deal for a reduced charge, both the prosecution and the defense reached an agreement on 10 years plus 5 years of probation. There's important context here. The rapper is already serving a life sentence after being convicted of a 2020 murder in July 2025. He was never getting out. So for the prosecution, the calculus is straightforward. They already have him on life without parole. A second trial means time, money, and resources for a man who is already sentenced to die in prison. A plea deal closes the case, gives the victim's family a conviction, and avoids the uncertainty of another trial. Barner, who also pleaded guilty, was sentenced to 25 years in prison. So Dominique Buddha Barner, who was the co-defendant in this case as well, also pleaded guilty and received a 25-year sentence. His sentence is actually longer than KSOO's for the Bibby case, but Barner does not have a prior life sentence hanging over him, which makes his 25 years the operative sentence determining when he could potentially be released. The timing of the plea is also notable. In the separate murder charge, Robinson admitted to fatally shooting 16-year-old Adrian Lil Bby Gaynor Jr. at the Hilltop Village Apartments on February 25, 2019, exactly 7 years ago Wednesday. The plea came almost exactly 7 years after the murder. February 25, 2019 to February 23, 2026. 7 years between the killing and the formal admission of guilt. 7 years that Bibby's family had to wait. 7 years during which KSOO was making music referencing the murder, sitting in jail on other charges, and going through a separate murder trial. For Bibby's family, this plea represents something definitive. No more trials, no more waiting, no more wondering. The person who killed their 16-year-old son stood in a courtroom and said he did it. Whether 10 years feels like justice for the taking of a child's life is a different conversation entirely. But the legal chapter, at least, is closed. Following the sentencing, KSOO posted on Instagram. Now, for somebody who is already serving life in prison with an additional 10-year sentence, the fact that he's still able to post on Instagram is itself noteworthy. The post was his reaction to the condemnation, a response to the situation. It's consistent with his behavior throughout this entire case. From the very beginning, KSOO has used social media as his primary outlet. From posting content that prosecutors say referenced murders, to making statements about his cases, to this latest post following his second sentencing, the pattern has not changed. Even from behind bars, the social media activity continues. Hakeem Robinson and Whitaker plan to appeal their convictions in McCormick's murder. So while the Bibby case is now resolved through a guilty plea, the Lil Buck case, the one that carries the life sentence, is still being contested through the appeals process. Whether that appeal has any chance of success is something only time will tell, but as it stands, KSOO has pleaded guilty in one murder and been convicted by a jury in another. Step back and look at the totality of what has happened here. A single family, the Robinsons, has been gutted by this gang war from every conceivable angle. Robinson's father, Abdul Robinson Sr., brother Abdul Robinson Jr., and cousin Leroy Whitaker were also convicted in McCormick's murder. Abdul Robinson Sr. was sentenced to time served, Abdul Robinson Jr. was sentenced to 12 years, and Whitaker received life in prison. Let's count. KSOO, life without parole. Leroy Whitaker, KSOO's cousin, life without parole. Abdul Robinson Jr., KSOO's brother, 12 years. Abdul Robinson Sr., KSOO's father, testified against his son, sentenced to time served. And before all of this even started, Willie Addison, KSOO's stepbrother, dead, killed in 2019 outside a club. The person whose death set off the chain of retaliation that led to Lil Buck's murder. Also entangled in the Bibby case is KSOO's brother, Abdul Robinson Jr., who awaits his own trial on second-degree murder charges. The family has been spread across courtrooms, jail cells, and cemeteries. The father cooperated with the state and walked away. The sons and the cousin are behind bars. The stepbrother is dead. KSOO's brother has been charged with second-degree murder in the shooting death of Damon Rothermel. Damon was killed by a stray bullet in 2019, the result of a gun battle between two vehicles. There were even more victims beyond the headline murders. A bicyclist named David Rothermel was killed by a stray bullet during a shooting that involved members of this same network. Abdul Robinson Sr. has pleaded guilty to soliciting a murder where the hitman missed his target and killed a bicyclist, David Rothermel, on Emerson Road in Jacksonville. Innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire of a war they had nothing to do with. And on the other side of the feud, Florida rapper Julio Fulio tragically lost his life at the age of only 26 as he was shot dead on Sunday, June 23rd in Tampa, Florida. According to his Instagram stories, the rapper was celebrating his birthday on the night of his shooting. Fulio's lawyer, Louis Fusco, stated that the rapper was ambushed in the parking lot of a Holiday Inn. Bibby's older brother, Julio Fulio, was shot and killed in Tampa in June 2024 while celebrating his birthday. Alicia Andrews received a manslaughter conviction in November 2024 for her role in Fulio's Tampa murder, while 4 other suspects await trial. So Bibby is dead, Fulio is dead, Willie Addison is dead, Lil Buck is dead. Multiple people are serving life in prison. A father testified against his own son. A mother described hearing her 16-year-old child's last words through rap videos posted online. The music videos that feature lyrics about murders of young men in Jacksonville have propelled the rappers to national fame, but behind the videos are families that are forced to relive the pain. This is the full cost of the ATK-KTA war. The case is part of a broader investigation into the violent feud between ATK and 6 Block, which has resulted in a string of deadly incidents across Florida. The ongoing prosecutions continue dismantling the Jacksonville gang network that terrorized the city through rap-related violence. When the mother of Lil Buck spoke at KSOO's sentencing, she had a statement read before the judge. She said, "Today will not erase that hurt, but it brings some kind of relief, knowing that these individuals will no longer have the power to take another life." She continued with a plea for an end to violence, especially within the rap community. She wrote, "This case is a painful reminder that Charles lost his life for simply saying something others didn't like. That line is worth sitting with. A man lost his life because of lyrics in a song. A 16-year-old was shot 45 times because of what side of a neighborhood he lived on. A father chose freedom over his son. A rapper used murdered teenagers as album titles and content for music videos." KSOO is now 26 years old. He has been sentenced to life without parole for one murder, and an additional 10 years plus probation for another. Both men plan on appealing their judgment and sentence, their attorneys told the judge. The appeals process will play out, but as of today, the legal system's verdict is clear. 2 murders, 2 convictions, no possibility of parole on the first. The second plea closing off the last open case. So when the title says, KSOO sentenced for Bibby's murder, goodbye forever, the goodbye was already decided months ago when that life sentence came down. The Bibby plea just made it official on both counts. There is nothing left to resolve, no pending charges, no upcoming trials for these murders. The chapter is written. For Bibby's mother, Elizabeth Gaynor, who said, "I feel like my life stopped. When my baby died, my life stopped." This plea is a conviction she had to wait 7 years for. For the families on every side of this conflict, the McCormicks, the Gaynors, the Robinsons, the losses are permanent, the sentences are permanent, and the consequences of a city's gang war, fueled by music, social media, and retaliation, are now etched into the public record forever. KSOO once posted content mocking the death of a 16-year-old boy. He named an album after that boy. He made songs about it. And now he has stood in a courtroom and admitted under oath that he killed him. The social media posts that once served as trophies became the evidence that prosecutors used to build their case. The music that made him famous became the soundtrack to his own conviction. And the father who was supposed to protect him became the witness who sealed his fate. That is the story of KSOO, Bibby, Lil Buck, and the Jacksonville rap war. It does not have a happy ending for anyone involved. It never could. The goodbye is forever, not just for KSOO, but for every person and every family touched by this cycle. And based on everything we've seen, the consequences are still unfolding. But for KSOO himself, the road ends here. Life in prison, plus 10 years, plus 5 years of probation. He will never serve on the outside. That is the sentence, that is the result, and that is where we leave it.